accurate, dependable, and late-breaking. This is local and state news on WLEN, Lenawee's local news station.
The race for Michigan's 16th state Senate seat is beginning to take shape ahead of the 2026 election. Republican incumbent Joe Bellino is seeking another term, while Democrat DeAndre Barnes is looking to bring a new voice to Lansing. Barnes says his campaign is focused on issues including working-class economic relief, education, infrastructure, and increasing community involvement in the policy-making process. He recently joined me to discuss his background, why he's running for office, and how he would represent residents across Lenawee, Monroe, and Hillsdale counties if elected. Here's my conversation with DeAndre Barnes. Hello, Lenawee County. My name is Brian Vish, and this week I am sitting down with Michigan's 16th district candidate, DeAndre Barnes. DeAndre, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to start with just a simple one. If you want to tell me about and the listeners about yourself and what experiences that you had that led you to run for the Michigan Senate.
Okay, a little bit about me. I was born in Chicago. Very, very slow beginnings, very humble beginnings. Grew up very, very poor there. My mother was looking to get out of a bad situation. My grandparents had moved to Los Angeles a couple of years prior, and she was like, "Hey, let's try it out there." We left Chicago when I was 10 years old. We moved to South Central Los Angeles, and things started to pick up there. Kind of ran into some trouble in my late teens, early 20s. I was looking to get out of Los Angeles with the gang violence there and the wealth disparity. I moved to Toledo in 1999, and I enrolled in college right away. I graduated from the University of Toledo with a Bachelor's of Business Administration in 2004. I graduated from Kaplan University, which is now known as Purdue Global University, online with my MBA, Master's of Business Administration, in 2010. I worked a number of odd jobs in the business sector, in the retail sector, but I wanted to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my career long term. So I became a substitute teacher. Now, you would think that would be a weird transition into a career, but it enabled me to see, to discover what I really want to do with my life. And it came down to teaching. I just finished my 8th year of teaching, my 5th year of teaching at Jefferson Schools in Monroe. I teach middle school computer technology at Jefferson Middle School. And from there is when I really started to see my students and their families struggle. And I got tired of seeing that. I've always been called to public service. In one way, shape, or form, but seeing families struggle as much as they have, and with the current elected officials in office, I got tired of seeing them not really do anything about it, not put forth any legislation to combat the suffering that I was seeing going on, and that propelled me or compelled me to run for office.
So what brought you to Michigan then? I know obviously you're working in Michigan, you're working in Monroe, you're a teacher here. Was that what kind of transitioned you from Toledo up to the Mitten? Because you've gone on a nice journey here through the U.S. so far.
Yes. So, I mean, sort of, kind of, but not really. After my first son was born in 2002, his mom is originally from Carlton.
Okay.
And we were living in Toledo at that particular time. And she wanted, after the baby was born, she wanted to be close to her mother and stepfather. So we started looking for places up here. We ended up settling on a place in Carlton, and in 2003, my state of Michigan journey began.
Absolutely.
So I've been a Michigander since 2003.
Oh, absolutely. I've been here my whole life, and I welcome to the state. I always welcome new faces
Thank you
here.
very much. I appreciate
So why specifically though for the 16th district then? So what do you believe that you have for voters for that district that is not being currently taken care of by their representative?
Mainly, I care. In my view, our current elected officials, whether it be at the federal level or the state level in District 16, have not shown that they actually care about the voters in our district. Um, I've seen it from the very bottom. I know what it's like to struggle, and I want to be able to offer the voters of our district an alternative. Too often, and I've seen this too often throughout District 16, we tend to vote against our best interests, and we tend to vote for people who talk a big game without actually showing that big game once they get into office.
So, what would you say are those biggest issues that we are facing in the 16th district? What are those things that maybe aren't being addressed?
Affordability, number one. Um, our current federal government is making things a lot more difficult for Michiganders than it has to be. I have not seen enough legislation to combat rising costs, whether it be rising gasoline costs, uh, food costs, insurance costs, which is a huge deal in Michigan. We have one of the highest insurance rates in the entire country. I haven't seen enough legislation in the books. I haven't seen enough calls for action uh, from from our elected officials for legislation that can combat the affordability crisis. Also, I haven't seen enough call to action in response to the decline of education in our state.
Mhm.
In recent years, we've fallen from approximately 19th to anywhere between 37th and 44th, depending on the metrics that are used in those studies. And we need to get our students to a place to where they are competitive in an ever-growing world economy.
So, that and education obviously is the gateway to that.
Yes,
And you being an educator, I would imagine you have a great wealth of knowledge firsthand
yes.
in that particular world. Mr. Wahlberg was on here last week discussing school choice. Obviously, that's a federal policy on that side,
Yes.
but that is something that has gone down to the state level. What is your take on that particular issue with regard to education? Should we be funding schools properly, or, and I say properly in a way of like evenly funding schools so that way it's not just based solely on district or income of that district, but rather just in the sense that everybody needs an education? Do you feel that that is the better way to go, or do you think that school choice is the route that we should go with voucher programs to allow for private education as well?
I'm not completely against voucher programs, but I do think that there is a lot um, of mishandling of funds
Okay.
in that area. I do not believe that private and parochial institutions should be able to um, increase their tuitions if they are participating in voucher programs, which from what I read in recent years happens to be a case across the scale. As a teacher, as a current teacher, I do believe that the state and or federal government should give teachers what they need, and should also give students what they need as far as curriculum to develop curriculum to succeed. I've spent thousands of dollars on my own classrooms over the years. And it shouldn't be that way. There's no way, there's no reason that a public school teacher should come out of their own pockets, especially when our incomes are sort of capped um, at a certain level. I believe that there should be more done at the state level, especially in regard to the school aid fund to be funded by at least 20% over the current cap to actually fund the schools to give what they need and not base it primarily on real estate taxes or property taxes or anything like that.
So obviously, education is only one part of that picture.
Right.
You also talk about the working class, adults who are in the workforce currently.
Yes.
So what would be three specific policies that we could look at that you want to propose or you would help to put in place that would directly benefit that group of people?
I would seek to codify legislation that would strengthen um, collective bargaining. There are too many instances in where worker protections are not guaranteed. Worker schedules are not guaranteed, um, as far as another policy that I would advocate for um, is the newly proposed plan to bring a state-run healthcare program that would actually provide a state option and that would lower the healthcare costs of voters not only in our district but throughout the state.
Mhm.
It would also provide an alternative healthcare programs that have been lost, especially because of the passage of legislation at the federal level.
Mhm.
It would also like because doing that would also help families to save money if they don't have to worry about whether they're going to be insured or if they have to get a procedure done and and buying school supplies or eating or anything like that. It puts their mind at ease. It also gives them more discretionary income to make necessary purchases for their household. Um, yeah, that's that's basically it.
So just a couple of follow-ups for that. Obviously, one, I used to be a retail worker, so I understand that never having a set schedule, never knowing
Hmm.
whether I'm going to have that day off in 2 weeks or not, because it is based on just seemingly randomness at times.
Yes.
From what you described, does that mean that you would push for making it so that those workers, the workers who are hourly retail workers, wouldn't have to deal with a random schedule, but the businesses would then have to give them a set schedule based on what their needs would be?
I believe in a more balanced approach.
Mhm.
I do acknowledge that there are businesses where there are last minute schedule changes. Someone may call in. You may be in a mid level manager position, and your position calls for you to cover shifts and things like that.
Mhm.
But I do think that any schedule changes should be at least 24 hours in advance. um, that would get parents, families ways to find health care and not health care, I'm sorry, child care and things like that in a timely manner. But I do think that there should be something in place
Mhm.
to where if you have a full-time job, you should get those full-time hours.
That's what I was wondering. I wanted clarification there,
Yes,
what you were thinking. Now, obviously, with a state-run program moving to the healthcare side of things,
yes,
I can see why that would absolutely be a benefit. You wouldn't have it tied to your employer, anything like that.
right,
But how do we implement something like this? There's going to be some type of obviously it's not it's only free at the point of service. We have to have it paid for in the back end with taxes in some way.
right.
So how are we going to adjust that? Is it a reallocation that you're looking at for taking funds we have and just redistributing them properly? Or are you looking at needing to increase taxes in certain areas? How would you go about that?
If necessary, increasing taxes, there will be a last resort.
Mhm.
I'm thinking more along the lines of offering employers, especially small business employers, some sort of incentive for adhering to new legislation. The exact details, of course, will have to be worked out. And I would have to do a lot of reaching across the aisle on that one, and talking to several people on the other side of the aisle to get this done. But yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily have to raise taxes in that area, but that would only be in a very last resort.
Thank you for that clarification. So, what would be one issue, as we're going to move away from kind of that to more party politics? So, what would be one issue that you would say you would disagree with the leadership of your party with?
Very good question. One thing I disagree with the leadership of my party. Probably that change comes slow.
Mhm.
Positive change come slowly,
Okay.
or should come slowly. I've been hearing that a lot throughout this campaign.
Mhm.
That whenever we want something to actually want something on the books that helps the average working American, the average working voter, that change comes really slow, and there's this long process, and we have to reach across the aisle several hundred times, and we have to get it right. I'm all for time phase out um, of certain issues. Maybe I can't get everything I want in the beginning, but I mean, if there's a 2 or 3 year rollout but we ultimately get to our goal.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. That's one of the things I'm willing to compromise on. But I do not believe that change has to be slow. When we talk about reaching across the aisle, the main thing is seeing each other as human beings who both have shared experiences. We all have to pay high gas prices. We all have to afford groceries and expenses for our families. That those shared experiences can be used to to make um, to make developing legislation easier, so that voters are not waiting 2, 3, 4, 5 years or until the next term for things to actually change.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, the philosopher Mick Jagger once saying, you can't always get what you want,
Right.
but if you try sometimes, you get what
You
you
get
need.
what you need, right?
And I think that's a great approach to how you would look at policies in the state. So, with that also in mind, looking at the other side of things, what is something that maybe, Democrats are saying that the Republicans are not taking as seriously as you think they should?
I do not think that our conservative colleagues are not taking the affordability crisis seriously enough. I've heard a lot of short-term pain for long-term gain,
Mhm.
which also goes back to what I just said about developing policy
Yeah.
in a timely manner. We're not seeing any solutions from them on this. Um, and I would love to see it. I would love to see our friends on the other side of the aisle developing policy. If they're saying that they're actually working for the people, I want them to work for the people. So show me something. I don't think that they're taking it seriously enough. There hasn't been anything proposed to offset costs, especially with respect to our farmers in a state that lost and estimated anywhere between 150 billion and 167 billion dollars in export revenue in 2025. I don't see anything on the books right now to combat uh, those federal tariffs
Yeah.
that were imposed. There's nothing to combat the slowing of fertilizer coming into our state, machine costs, machinery inputs, things like that. I haven't seen anything proposed from them to actually combat that. So I would love to see something.
So, with that in mind, because obviously Lenawee is a huge farm community,
It is.
and there's a big chunk of Monroe that's a farm community. What would you do on, like, say, day one, day two, to start the process of trying to maybe ease that pain or regain some of that loss?
Day one, I'm reaching across the aisle to every single conservative elected official who was in our district. I would bug them if I have to get a meeting to get an ear, because we have to figure this out very, very soon. There are people suffering out here, and I cannot continue to see that. Day one, I'm contacting everybody.
That kind of brings into my next set, like
Mhm.
if I was thinking about for your platform specifically,
Yes.
you say that policy should be co-created
Yes.
with the community through citizen advisory council.
Yes.
So, how would members of those councils be selected if you're able to do that?
Well, that the actual process is still in development, but the advisory councils will be made up of school teachers,
Mhm.
both public and private,
Yeah.
because we basically have the same
Beautiful.
basic issues. Citizens within each community, community leaders that people have actually grown up with, they look up to, they respect. The advisory councils would not be made of any sort of political insiders at all. I want a voice that represents the people and the people only.
Yeah.
What those advisory councils would do is they would actually look at legislation that's either currently on the books, or that have been newly introduced, or any sort of legislation that I want to propose.
Yeah.
And we would actually sit down and have meetings, and determine what's best for our district.
Yeah.
And I would like to have an advisory council in all 3 counties, since the needs, as you go across the district, um, we have basic needs. But like you said, Lenawee County, huge farming community. Hillsdale County, huge farming community. Though they're the levels to where they need help and legislation may be a little different.
Mhm.
So I would like to have advisory councils in all 3 counties. Sit down with them And before I vote on anything, of course, as long as they're presented with the bills in a timely manner, we can sit down. I want them to look at everything and say, hey, here's what we need from you. Here's what we expect from you. Can you get it done for us? And then I vote accordingly.
That is an interesting idea, and I like this idea. That just off the top of my head here, mostly because here in Lenawee, we just recently had an issue with some policies. One of our commissioners, Commissioner Martis, was actually trying to help, and it was regarding data centers and renewable energy coming down here. And while a lot of us are not against things like renewable energies,
Right.
data centers are something that a lot of us are looking at because of the impacts that
Yes.
these are having
Yes.
on our environment. Or even when it comes to renewables, just being able to have control of what happens in our community. Is that the goal of those advisory councils? And how would you define a political insider? Because that term is thrown around a lot,
Mhm.
and I want to make sure that we're clear for our listeners what is meant by that.
A political insider is someone who has an alternative vested interest in any policy that's made, whether it be someone who's already connected to someone in Lansing, or someone who may be who may stand to benefit from the sale of land to AI data center
Yeah.
companies or developers. So if you stand to gain at any level from any policy developed or looked at in an alternative way, um, and your interest would not serve the community at large, you're not there. I'm sorry. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
You're fine. That was a long explanation, a long question. So the next one I was talking about was, aside from the political insiders, obviously they have influence on these things.
Right.
We're having to deal with, specifically here in Lenawee, we're looking at renewable energy coming
Yes.
down,
Yes.
data centers coming down. We've made it very clear.
Yes.
So what is it that you would do to help make sure that the autonomy that Lenawee is looking for, that Hillsdale wants, that Monroe County wants, to not have to be told, if it works in Sheboygan, it works in here. That's not the case.
No.
So what would you do to help make sure that the voices here in this district are heard?
Through the advisory councils, um, and my own staff investigations of policy, and my own investigations of policy and developing policy, I've made a pledge to never vote against the will of the people. There can be, I do understand that people are pulling you in 50 million different directions in Lansing, but it ultimately comes back to the people who got you there. It comes back to the voters. It comes back to the community leaders. It comes back to the kids and their families in those schools that you're advocating for. So as part of my own accountability, that's one of the reasons why I want the advisory councils in place. It helps to keep me on track, and it keeps me grounded. So, I mean, if the people of my district don't want a data center because of the way that they're currently developed and constructed, I can't see myself voting that way at all.
Absolutely. You've covered quite a bit of what I was going to ask about.
Oh. Good.
That's
Good,
fine.
good.
That's perfect, because I mean, you get to this one, which special interest groups. They often include things like labor unions, farm organizations, chambers of commerce. It's not always necessarily the group people think.
Right.
So when you talk about reducing the influence of special interests, what is it that you mean when you're discussing that?
I have pledged to not take any dark money at all.
Mhm.
I'm running a grassroots campaign, completely built and funded by the people in my district. Special interests have their own interests. They have their own agendas, their alternative agendas, and they expect you, if they support you, to vote in a certain direction.
Yes.
That proves more often than not to be counterintuitive, and counterproductive in actually looking out for the people support you.
Yeah.
I haven't found too many cases to where adhering to a special interest group is a good thing. But like I said before, I made a pledge to myself and to the voters of District 16 to not vote against their best interests. Anything that I put forward, anything that I investigate, any bill that is presented to the Michigan Senate, I will look over it with a fine tooth comb. I will talk to my advisory councils. I will talk to community leaders and get as much input as I possibly can before I make a decision to vote yeah or nay.
Absolutely. So, you know, with all of this in mind, we're talking about your advisory councils, your pledge to not take dark money and to always vote basically with those advisory councils. What is a recent policy or proposal that was put through in Lansing that you think would have been improved or maybe even halted if your advisory councils were in place?
I think that the one policy that the public would have benefited from was the expansion of the Freedom of Information Act. Um, the way that is currently written, the way it currently is on the books, is that it does not include the two branches of the state legislature, nor does it include the governor. So it gives those elected officials um, at least some incentive to hide things. I'm not saying that they are, but it gives them it gives them pretense to actually hide where there be campaign funding, or maybe they have two or three homes in places that they're not supposed to, but it just gives them some sort of incentive to hide things. I think that the Freedom of Information Act in the state of Michigan should be expanded to include those branches and the government. Uh, the House and the Senate and the governor in a call basically for more transparency.
Yeah.
I mean, people see it at the federal level all the time. We want to know who's backing them. We want to see where their money is coming from. We want to know if they're hiring any sort of anything that could be included in the SEC filing. Maybe they just sold a home in a different state or something. But yeah, I mean, I think that if the advisory councils were get involved, not just in District 16, but throughout the state, I think that's something that we can bring to fruition.
Well, and that also kind of comes back to that, with absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
So if you don't have, someone watching, who watches the watchman?
Right.
Is another good phrase
Right.
that we can go right back to.
Exactly.
So obviously the 16th district is not just rural areas. It's comprised of a lot of different areas. We have urban, we have suburban, we have rural areas. So with these advisory councils that you would like to propose, how do you ensure that they don't become one-sided to any particular area?
I would like at least one person and the number of of voters on each council has not been determined yet.
Mhm.
But I would like at least one voter, one council member to be from one section of the county. The way I figure it, I split the district into several sections depending on the size of the county. And I would like to have at least seven from various areas, because I need to get as much feedback as I can, and I cannot overload it or front load it with too many people from a certain area. It wouldn't serve anyone any good. So I'm thinking at least seven, um, and I would like to have their primary residences at the very least 10 miles apart. And that's the very least. And of course, this is the beginning stages, but that's how I would like to have it right now. It'll help to ensure that it's not overlogged with too many voters from a particular geographical area.
Excellent. So as we come to the end of this, obviously this is for the midterm elections. You're running against Joe Bellino.
Yes.
So what is one reason why someone who supported Joe Bellino in the last election would now say, I'm going to support DeAndre Barnes?
Very good question. Um, One thing I would ask them to do is to not listen to what he says,
Mhm.
but actually to investigate what he's actually done. Um, I would like for them to look over his voting record of the last 3.5 years
Mhm.
that he's been in our state senator. If they do, they will see that he's primarily voted down everything that will help them. I can't say for sure that he votes along party lines, but his votes help to his votes in the Senate give credence to that. I wish I I didn't have to say that, but I would ask them to look at any policy that he's put forth or co-sponsored in the last 3.5 years. I would ask them to go to his social media, see what he's advocating for, see what he's talking about. Is it the same old Democrats that have done this, or is it to the level of I'm a public servant, I'm working for you, here's what I'm doing for you. So I would ask every voter to perform their own due diligence with any candidate, but especially um, the candidate on the other side of the aisle in this race. Don't just listen to what he says. Actually investigate what he does or what he has done.
All right, excellent. So, last question for the interview. What is something that you would do to help start to bring in new industry or support current industry in the 16th district?
Since tourism is huge
Mhm.
um, in our state, and I've been racking my brains about this since I first filed to run.
Mhm.
We have to bring. We have a beautiful country here in our district. We have wonderful local businesses, very nice scenery here, top notch. Um, I think that I and my team will have to find ways to to advertise that more, to bring in more tourism to our district. We need to bring in not only those people but those dollars.
Yeah.
It'll help to support small business. Supporting small business in turn helps support the farmers in our district since they'll be able to sell their products um, and their crops to local businesses. But yeah, we need to find a way to bring in tourism, more tourism to the areas of District 16.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Lenawee County. I'm Brian Fish. This is DeAndre Barnes, and he has been here with us today in studio discussing his campaign for the 16th State Senate District here in Michigan.
Count on WLEN, Lenawee's local news station, to keep you informed with accurate and dependable information 24 hours a day.